Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm very privileged to be here with this assortment of Black gentlemen. Today's conversation is really addressing the racial wealth gap in America. The title of this is Black Wealth and Oxymoron, and we're really going to talk about addressing the change we want to see in Black America and America overall. Just to level set on this conversation, we could spend the 30 minutes having a history lesson, but we should talk about the compounding factors of how we got here. So, 250 years, nearly of African Americans, Black Americans being used as capital to grow this country. And then another century of a combination of Jim Crow laws, Black codes, and then you get into systematical governmental issues. Anyone who has taken American history knows that the New Deal did not include Black people for the majority of part. The GI Bill did not include the creating of the middle class, and suburbia did not include Black people. So as we look at the racial wealth gap, I think one of the comments that we had earlier was that it is not the gap is not a bug, it's a feature of the current system. So what we're trying to do is talk about that system, how it impacts our daily lives, and come out with what we think are some reasonable directions to point to for solutions. So with that said, I'd like to kick off this conversation with you gentlemen, first with just not really, we got a wide variety of experiences here. So I just want to kind of intro to you guys. I'm going to toss it to you. If you could say briefly, just kind of your background. I just want to get an idea of how diverse the group is. And I'm going to start off with you, Shane. If you could, just do a quick intro and let the group know who you are.
How you doing, gentlemen? My name is Shane Cade. I am a founder and creative director for Black Ursa Media. I've worked a long time in Chicago, graduated here, started my family here, and making sure that this conversation is big in our community is a big part of why I'm here. So thank you guys for having me and letting me be here.
Thank you, Shane. Guion.
Hi, my name is Guion Foreman. I'm the president and CEO of Emerald South Economic Development Collaborative, which is an economic development organization on the south side of Chicago, working very closely with the city of Chicago, the University of Chicago, and the Barack Obama Foundation. I also have the pleasure of serving as the president of the Chicago Police Board.
Thank you, Guion. Rashard.
Hi, everybody. Hi, gentlemen. Looking forward to being here. Excited to be here. My name is Rashard Johnson. I serve as the president of Advocate Trinity and South Suburban Hospitals, serving the south side of Chicago and the south suburbs. And this is a great conversation for us to have, one that's timely and one that I'm truly excited that we're having.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ray Gibson.
Hey, Ray Gibson here. I'm excited to talk to all of you gentlemen here. Likely the most junior person on here, so had to add a bit of diversity here. But I'm a manager over here at OMD, Omnicom, and excited to kick off this conversation. It is an important one, so glad to see what everyone thinks.
Thank you, Ray. Greg.
Good evening, gentlemen. Greg McCampbell, enterprise account exec with Barcodes Inc. I've been in corporate America working for the last 30 to 35 years. I've seen a lot, and I hope I can add some value to this conversation.
Thank you, Greg. Willis.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here, as all of you have mentioned. The name is Willis Reed. I'm currently a HR business partner for Levi Strauss & Co., supporting the globe when it comes to direct-to-consumer, wholesale, as well as frictionless operations. Have a background in mergers and acquisitions, as well as corporate development, from kind of a core expertise, and extremely excited to be here. Born in Chicago, lived in Chicagoland area between the city, as well as supporting our surrounding suburbs. So excited to kick off this conversation.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, let's jump right into it. I think that it's important to talk about real life impact. So, Guion, as you serve the community, can you give us an idea of on an everyday level, what does the racial wealth gap look like to you from your POV?
Yeah, a lot of times I get this question, and people think about wealth as monetary things, assets. And in my experience, just what I deal with on a day-to-day basis, that certainly is a part of the equation. Wealth. We talk about home ownership rates and 401ks and investing. We certainly talk about that, and I think that is a very important part. But I also think that, in my experience, when we talk about wealth, I think that it's very important that we also talk about health, physical health, mental health. These are things that absolutely are impacting our communities, and also peace. I think that the communities in which I work, we have high rates of violence, and what's money if you don't have health and if you don't have peace. So the way that I think about wealth, it's a quote that I use pretty often, that wealth is the byproduct of solving problems and creating value. If you can do both of these things effectively, you create a high rate of return. So for me, when I think about the racial wealth gap, certainly there's some catching up, some reparations that need to happen in order to do that efficiently. But I think we have to look at the entire ecosystem of how our communities work efficiently.
As a perfect segue, Rashard, what Guion was saying here is that the picture's bigger, and health equals wealth. Can you elaborate a little bit of that from your point of view?
Absolutely. And I agree wholeheartedly with Guion. I mean, when you think about it, one of the things that we focus on, and I'm blessed and privileged to serve in the healthcare sector, but we look at the social determinants of health as being extremely important. And, you can't, health is wealth. I love that saying. But the social determinants of health, do we have quality access to health? Are there good paying jobs and where you can earn more than the livable wage? Affordable housing, things of that nature. When you look at the food gaps and food disparities, as far as having a food desert, all of those things are critical. Education and access to education. Are we being educated and taught the things that are necessary? And ultimately, having a job and having a good employment leads to access to healthcare and insurance and things of that nature. So I think those things are extremely important, and we focus on that from a transformative effort. We focus a lot of time there because if you don't have that as a foundation, it's very hard to start building on the things that you need in order to achieve what we would consider to be wealth.
Very well said. Willis, same question. From where you sit in your experience, how does the racial wealth gap appear in your life?
Yeah, it appears in plenty of different ways. For me, as the two prior speakers, Rashard and Guion here, Gian, excuse me, it shows up in not just from a day-to-day life of our resources when it comes to our communities, as they're mentioning, between healthcare, as far as the peace within our communities, but also just when it comes to on our day-to-day lives from a work aspect, when we see practices, when we see things that happen in our jobs, from how we go about hiring, how we go about talent planning, how we go about schooling for children and communities that we live in. It touches every single thing that we do on a day-to-day. And it's one of those aspects that it's so many different areas are interconnected when we see the gaps, where when we say wealth, it's not just, okay, this is how much money we have, but how are we really building our future, as well as recognizing the issues that we've had from our past and trying to, bridge that gap for what it actually means to move forward. And I see it in a lot of different ways, like I said, from my day-to-day life when it comes to work and influencing decisions, influencing how things are thought about, how things are progressed as far as just day-to-day work, projects, investments, and things that we're going to do from a company aspect or people aspect, and plenty of other ways as well. So I'd say that's kind of how I see it from a day-to-day aspect.
Greg, Guion mentioned not being able to see some of the impacts of the racial wealth disparity. And I know in an earlier conversation with you, you had hit up on that and the impact of real estate and how it plays in that. Can you expound on that more?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so real estate ownership in the United States is a fairly new thing for people of color, less than 100 years. Um, and the fact that whites were able to build wealth through real estate, we now entered into that, and we're transferring that real estate ownership to our children.
Thank you. You know what? Let's. I want to fast forward just a little bit, and let's get into some of the challenges and more so. We've hit on things that I think have a compounded impact on the racial wealth gap, and the reason why we call it Black wealth and oxymoron is because the two are not featured as hand in hand as you would think if you're trying to go after the American dream. Visual representation plays a role in that too as well. Shane, in your field, how do you feel that also impacts the ability to generate wealth?
Oh man, I think that perspective is big with the wealth gap. One of the things that I feel like it plays the most, I feel like in the media, in my particular field, is about information. One of the big things that I talk about within this particular subject is, and I think me and you have talked about this before, information. The information gap equals the wealth gap. The less information people in our community know about things concerning their economic place in the world, where they are, how they can improve their economic situation, their understanding of things like credit and stocks and just general information about our economy, reducing that gap with people and bridging that gap for people in our community purely on just information and understanding where to be, where to go. It's an essential part of our lives. I think tightening that gap and really honing in on information. Yeah, I'm listening to all of you gentlemen, and I just feel like I'm trying to hang on to every word you guys say, because I'm telling you, the more information I have, the more information we as a community have, I think really will radically reduce the wealth gap in all different kinds of ways. And I think my particular field, media, social media, online learning, all those things play a huge part in how we can start to extend that information and close that gap for sure.
Thank you, Shane. Ray and Guion, I'm going to come to you guys with the same question. Shane mentioned information, and one of the things that we had talked about earlier was data. In a lot of our world, we use data to not only identify challenges, but also accountability and solutions. So with the full understanding that, financial literature is not going to close the gap, but it is helpful. How can data play a role? Ray, I know that in your everyday life, you are dealing with data, but in your view, how does data have a role in terms of closing the wealth gap?
I think data allows you to kind of assess whatever situation anyone is in, what kind of resources are available to certain communities, and I guess kind of figure out a way to alleviate any inequity that may exist in said communities. However, I think it also has a let's call it a compounding effect and an ability to kind of pigeonhole it and what's the word I'm looking for? Continue to I guess perpetuate the same ideals that continue to happen, right, in similar ways. I think you can splice data to make any story that you want, but I also think that if you look at data as unbiased as you can, it can tell you a great story, and give you the information you need to assess and tackle any problems that you can find. So applying that to the wealth gap, I think, you can look and say something like 50% of the Black community is unbanked or underbanked, right? And you say, all right, well, what does that mean? It's like a lot of the Black community doesn't have a bank account. A lot of the Black community does, but maybe they're still using like check cash in places or alternatives for loans due to whatever circumstances, right? And you can look at that data and you can tell one or two stories, right? You can say, okay, well, that means there's an awareness problem. Like maybe more people need to be, in line to understand what banks can offer you. Or there's stories like, well, maybe there's another reason for this that may stand out. So I think data has the ability to tell the story and assess whatever situation you're in, but it's dependent on whoever has it to use it in a proper way.
Yeah, I think it's who's doing the analysis that is also very important, but also oftentimes we view data from a deficit-based perspective rather than an asset-based perspective. So we always hear about how many dropouts, right, or how many people, but you don't get to hear how many graduates, right, and to analyze, well, what happened there and what are the lessons you can apply there. So really what I've observed is that a lot of times in philanthropy, especially, it's a deficit-based perspective. I understand the reason for that because we're trying to close that gap. We're trying to close that deficit, but rather than taking an asset-based approach, we tend to approach the negative side, right? And so a negative times a positive is going to give you a negative. So I choose to, when I'm utilizing data, is to focus on the assets that we have and really kind of strengthen those things and build a strong foundation in which we can continue to build upon.
That's a great point. And I think from a perspective of junk in, junk out, whenever you use data, you can't expect it to correct bad information in. Is not going to result in good information out. Rashard, we talk about generating wealth, and even we talked about health, but from a standpoint of community support, how does that look? And is that something that is a weight upon the ability to generate wealth?
There's no question. There's no question that there's a weight, Walter. I mean, when you think about it from a community standpoint, and you think about, let's just take institutions, let's take organizations that are a part of communities. I'll take healthcare. Healthcare. One of the things that we pride ourselves on, we know that we are economic engines within the community, and that goes to providing jobs. Decent paying jobs, but health insurance. It also goes to investing in the community, into the local businesses and entrepreneurs and suppliers. Whereas you can start to utilize those assets and those resources generated to put that into the community, where the community can start being self-sustaining and addressing some of those social determinants of health. And so when it comes to being an economic engine, I think the onus is on us. Many organizations, if you look back and you look at the things that we've experienced over the last year or so in regards to COVID, in regards to the systemic racial injustices that have been profiled and put on the spotlight, you've seen a lot of organizations come out and start asking those questions as to how do we get more involved and how do we utilize and leverage our assets and our resources. And I think it's time for us to ensure that there's a level of accountability that's there, that when you are a part of a community, it's more than just residing in that community, but it's all the ways that you can utilize those funds and those finances to ensure that you're hiring from that community, you're building training programs, you're going out and being a part of the education system and showcasing your team members, your leadership, so that kids have exposure and you're investing into those local businesses, Black-owned, women-owned, minorities. I think it's extremely important.
I'm going to take it a step further. I recently heard it said that Black capitalism is not going to save Black America, right? And so, I don't disagree. Community has to step up. It's important, but it has to be more than just, we always hear the conversation about, oh yeah, we're going to do this, a training program. We need much more than that, right? We heard about all the billions of dollars after the uprisings from last summer that were committed, and it's still just commitments. right? And so there are real needs out here in the community. So we can keep talking about it, right? And every couple of years, every 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years or whatever, we can have an uprising, burn some buildings down. But until that money actually hits these communities and starts impacting the people in these communities, we're going to keep having this conversation. So really, when corporate America, when philanthropy, and when individuals decide to step up and say, look, let's make a change, that's when I think we're going to really start to see some change.
Yeah. And Willis, to Guion's point, you know, it's not the Black community. I mean, you can just look at the buying power of the Black community. It's not like they're not generating impact into products and goods and services. What do you think hinders the ability for that, as Guion talked about, you know, that development? I think that's a great point. You know, there, if I can just stretch his point out for you, there is reinvestment of banks back in the community, not just community banks or Black banks, but banks, you know, food deserts. I mean, if you think about it, the impact that Rashard is talking about on health being wealth, if you don't have options, if the local grocery is not 11 locations, but none of them are in or within 9 miles of where you live, those things have impact. But from your POV, how does that look?
No, I think the biggest piece is the priority to want to invest in those aspects, right? So I think oftentimes from systems, corporations, varieties of infrastructures, they benefit by these disparities. So the fact that that benefit is there for them, that priority to oftentimes try to invest in these areas or these communities or these problems, it's a conflict of interest sometimes. So I think that is the biggest piece that I would say from my point of view. But as they start to realize also the buying power that the Black dollar has, they have to kind of weigh that of, okay, is it worth us then going in and trying to leverage that Black dollar to continue to build up whatever our infrastructure is, whether it is, you know, a corporation, a system, etc. However, oftentimes we don't see that priority or that vision is there for the Black dollar or just Black, you know, folks as a whole. So I think that's the biggest piece from my point of view of why we continue to see those lack of investments, whether it is resources, banking, just consumers that are Black or people of color, and those aspects where if they were, you'd see a great return on it, but oftentimes that's just not the priority because that disparity already creates dollars and creates that wealth, much further.
Oh, so we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to change the conversation to what you guys believe are ways that we can accelerate the closing of this gap. And maybe give me one or two of what you think, in your opinion, or areas that we need to address. Shane, I'm going to start off with you.
One or two things that I think could start to help us rapidly is future talent opportunity pipelines. And by that I mean is kind of all of what you gentlemen are talking about. It's not just about having discussions are coming together about what we should do about internships and this, that, and the other, but it's actually having a active, proactive, set up pipeline for young Black people coming into the economic situation, pre-thought about, pre-set up, not something that we're going to be clamoring to piece together at once right now in the present. I'm talking about pipelines created by businesses for young engineers, geared for certain schools to help usher these people in our community and help them, guide them through certain elements and objectives in their lives. I think it starts with the young talent. It starts with our future. Of course, we have a lot of different great, successful Black gentlemen, as we can see here in our community now, who has a lot of wealth and a lot of information. But I think funneling that information and then harnessing all of those efforts, like a lot of those efforts are scattered, I think by in some way coming together to, direct some of these efforts directly into our community, not just, hey man, can we get some dollars for this program or that, but really finding out what communities need, especially people of color, and finding out what we can do to help move people from here to there in a way that is surrounded by like a community-based effort, not just, you know, us relying on each individual like elements, our individual growth. Because I mean, of course, that's an element too. But I think there's also there's growth to be had there. Also, one other thing I think is having local Black focused think tanks. And I'm telling you, I feel like whenever you hear about any agenda, especially conservative agendas who aren't often on the side of the Black community, there's a think tank behind every single thing they're doing. It puts them everyone on the same page. They think of opportunities in local areas to help grow that area, because every Black situation, even community based here in Chicago, aren't the same, and issues aren't the same. So having people locally come together and think about what can help our community locally in just this area, not in solve the problems for all of America, just the problems for this community here in a controlled, organized way, I think is one of those first steps to starting to come up with the ideas. I mean, how can I come up with the best idea for Black people in Philadelphia never being there, right? There's things that happen that we all share in, but who's to say that I would know? But here in Chicago, maybe with young and up and coming artists, I may have an idea. So being a part of maybe a think tank that helps with that might be a big way to start to reduce that gap rapidly and in a focused way.
Thank you. Greg, same question.
Yeah. So, I mean, to put it simple, America owes Black America a true up. Honest true up. Give us a level playing field. Stop putting things in our way, obstacles in our way, to prevent us from reaching the goals we want to reach. And I think with all that in place, things would eventually even out.
Okay. Gian, I'm going to come back to you, and Willis, I'm going to come back to you as well these last couple minutes. I will say this, that it feels like you have to change your thinking around the way that you engage the Black community. Engage it the same way as you. I mean, to me, it's the difference between the response of crack cocaine and the response with opioids. You know, there's a different response. It's a difference between having a downturn in a Black or brown community versus having a depressed area. The solutions that go into that come into not the people are the problem, but there is a problem. Let's solve the problem. Gian, again, what do you see as one of the major steps we can take to close the gap?
So first, I think that there needs to be a dedicated effort to bring together corporate, government, our educational institutions, philanthropy, and community in one effort. So we're going the same direction, thinking the same thing. Second, I think it's up to us as individuals to have an individual effort, not just Black people, but everyone, white people, to step up and really make a decision and say, hey, I am going to be a part of this solution. And then, I wouldn't be me if I didn't make a little controversial statement. I know this is about Black wealth right now, but I think that we end up setting ourselves back by not talking about our Latino brothers, our Native American brothers, sisters, because we're all going through the same thing. They're having the same conversation that we're having. And I think that it actually puts us a little bit further behind in doing so.
100%. Willis?
No, I love that, because that was actually one of the things I was actually thinking about, of just not just within Black people, or especially within Black people, the intersection, right? All Black people, it's not a template. It's not a one size fits all, right? So I think having all of those understandings with each of those infrastructures or systems between education, corporate, government, knowing that, and then realizing that, and then addressing it of like, how can we make an approach that actually touches on all of these different demographics, even within Black people, and then taking it a step further, as Gian mentioned, with additional folks of color, right? Because we're all fighting the same fight. It's a matter of how do we really develop it further, and starting to have conversations like these, starting to get people that are actually privileged from the wealth gap of ourselves, where we're part of it, and so having those conversations of how we can help bring along others along this journey, because it's a never-ending journey. I think those are some of the immediate steps that we can take, but it really is a lot more to it of the broader infrastructures and broader systems at hand. that really need to take a step up and really, start to move this forward even further than we can amongst of us in this conversation here.
And Greg, same question to you.
So definitely, I believe that as long as there's a plan in place, and the plan may not fit every community, it necessarily, but it'll help individuals have a path, a roadmap in order to get to a goal to achieve something where we can see more than a small percentage of us crossing that line with the wealth gap and more people. And as we come across, we have to reach back into our communities and help each other achieve the goal. So I think just a simple plan, a couple of steps, a way to guide individuals to this goal will be great.
And gentlemen, as we close out this, first of all, I want to say thank you very much. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate you brothers as always. I want to ask this question, and I'm going to ask it with raising your hand if you agree. A serious conversation about closing the wealth gap must also have a serious conversation about reparations. Just a show of hands if you agree with that. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for this. I think that this has been great. I think whoever we can help along the way, I think we've pushed that ball a little closer to getting to the truth. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate the conversation.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.